mill. This module will supply information on the safe operation of the vertical milling machine. Some of the material may sound familiar to you. This is because it applies to machines in general, because they all have certain common elements. But most of the advice is concerned with only the vertical mill. Sometimes the mind becomes so engrossed in what it's doing that it forgets about the fringe hazards the hands must go through to accomplish the objective. Too many times it is suddenly and sharply jarred back to reality when it is too late. In other words, after an accident has occurred. The best insurance against this ever-present danger is to analyze and study the possibilities beforehand and establish rules of procedure that will avoid or bypass the avenues of high risk. However, the real safe operating environment can only come about when the rules of safe procedure are practiced so much that they become automatic or almost instinctive. The milling machine, like any other powered machine, has no intellect or conscience. It will cut with beautiful precision anything the operator puts within contact. This includes shirt sleeves, shop aprons or coats, rings, watches, and fingers. The first step in safety is to leave your ego in your toolbox and realize there may be a few things you don't know about yet. Wait until you have received clear-cut and comprehensive instructions from whomever is in charge before you start the machine. Learn how to start the machine, but before you turn it on, learn how to apply the brake to stop it, quickly and safely. Now that you can safely start and stop the machine, you are no doubt anxious to get going. Sorry, not just yet. See the table in front of you? Lean on it. Now remember that lean because it's going to be the last time you're ever going to do it. Leaning on a milling machine table is only for those who hate to play the piano so much they want to lose their fingers. It can also affect the accuracy of precision work. With your instructor's permission, start the machine. Look at the whirring cutter while you let your imagination play around a bit. Visualize what your fingers would look like if you put them on that table under the cutter. If that doesn't chill your bones, a machinist's career is not for you. Don't misunderstand. There will be times when you will have your hands in contact with milling cutters, but only, repeating only, when they are dead still, and the power to the machine is off. Chickens make the best machinists. Why? Because they're so afraid of those moving cutters that they won't ever reach by them. They can go merrily clucking around while the foolish are in the hospital recovering from a finger shortage. Don't you ever reach by the cutters. Be a chicken. It's a lot more fun. Unless a cutter fits your machine properly, not almost, but right on, don't use it. You can ruin the machine, the cutter, and your reputation as a good machinist. If you don't have a reputation yet, you can soon establish one, but you won't like the name. Another important point to remember about cutters is to extend them from the spindle only as much as is necessary for the job being performed. After inserting the cutter in the proper collet or tool holder, make certain the drawbar is tightened properly. Never, repeat, never leave the wrench on the drawbar. If the machine should mistakenly be turned on, the wrench could easily become a misguided missile and wreak havoc in the shop. When bolting a vise or any other work-holding device to the mill table, always place a washer over the bolt before installing the nut. Before using T-slot nuts, make sure the stud is the correct length and that it is threaded all the way into the T-slot nut. Always use the proper tools on the mill, and never use tools that don't fit. It may not be fatal, but it sure can be sloppy and dangerous. When it becomes necessary to use a large wrench and the big muscle on the machine, and it will, be sure you have good footing and the wrench is in the correct position on the nut or bolt, because if it gives suddenly, you could be in for a long walk, if you can still walk. Check that the workpiece and the holding device are secured properly before beginning the cutting operation. Before starting the machine, check for the proper spindle speed, table feed, and depth of cut. A good rule of thumb for end mills is that the depth of cut should not exceed the radius, 1/2 the diameter, of the mill being used. Just because you have been told to keep fingers away from the moving cutters doesn't mean that it's all right to use something else, like shop rags or brushes. Don't place anything near those revolving cutters. What about changing work setups, taking measurements, or making adjustments when the cutter is moving? Absolutely not. Only 3 things should be near those moving cutters: the workpiece, air, and when required, coolant. When fly cutting on the vertical mill, always adjust the rotation of the cutter so that the chips are directed away from yourself and others. When you have to move a heavy attachment to or from a machine, watch that hero complex. Don't be proud. Get help or use the proper lifting device. Be sure you lower the knee as far down as it will go. If your buddy wants to be helpful, let him change a tire on your car or something, but don't let him start your machine for you. Only one person should start and stop the machine: you. It's all right to use a blast of air to remove the chips from your machine if your car is at an easy access in the parking lot with the motor running, because your coworkers will only let you do it once. Better use a brush. Protect your hands and stay on the job until you're ready to leave. You'll hear the term conventional milling or upcutting used in the shop. It refers to the method of feeding the work into the cutter against the rotation of the cutter. It's the only way most older and larger mills can cut, so be sure your cutter is feeding into the work correctly. Another term, climb cutting, refers to the feed being in the same direction as the rotation of the cutters. You'll find this capability on some of the newer models. So again, be sure before using this method of cutting. If you goof, you can be sure you'll remember your mistake, and so will your coworkers. One final rule: when in doubt, ask. It's so much easier than trying to explain a ruined workpiece, machine, or worse, a ruined operator.